Welcome to the Black Writer Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali-Coleman. The Black Writer Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. B. Sharise Moore is the author of Dr. Marvellus Djinn's Odd Scholars, Conjuring Worlds, an Afrofuturist Textbook for middle and high school, and the forthcoming book, Fangs, Feathers, and Folklore, Africa's Amazing Beasts. B. Sharise Moore's poems have appeared in a half-dozen journals and magazines. A writer, educator, curriculum designer, and the poetry editor at FIYAH magazine of Black speculative fiction, B. Sharise lives in Baltimore, Maryland, with her husband and young son. We welcome her today in the Black Writers Studio. So I am so excited that you are here in the Black Writers Studio, one of the first writers that are part of this series that I get to get my hands on, because I have been such a fan of yours for such a long time, but I'm extremely thrilled every time I see your name, because your name is just everywhere now, because there's so many things that you're doing. You're a multi-genre writer.
Yes.
I first, came upon your work as a colleague in the local DC, Maryland, Virginia art scene as a poet. But what folks didn't realize at the time, some may have, is that you also were a novelist, right? You are a
Yes.
novelist.
Yes.
You are a screenwriter. You are now a curriculum developer in terms of
Right.
not attached to a school, but creating textbooks, right? And
Right.
so B. Sharise Moore, it is such a pleasure to have you here at the Black Writers Studio, and welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Khadijah, for having me. I appreciate you, and you know I love you.
Yes, and the
Always
feelings
have.
mutual. So as I told you, offline, what I really want our conversation today to be about is really to be guided by um, some of the things that I know that you need to be sharing, because it's out now. But I also am really interested in you sharing some of the behind the scenes, being this multi-genre writer, now showing up in spaces where your work is now poised to reach a more national, international audience. I'm really interested to check in with you as a writer. What is your writer's life really composed of right now? What would you say are some of the things that you're actively engaging in right now as a writer?
Right now, I am devoting most of my time to finishing this chapter book. So let me begin by saying this. I started off writing poetry, Khadijah, and I was terrified of fiction. All right.
Wow, really?
Terrified. Now, I've always been a huge reader. So, Judy, Blume, Roald Dahl, those were my favorite authors growing up,
Yeah.
Anne and Martin. So, Babysitter's Club, um, Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Super
Yes.
Fudge,
I'm getting
Deanie.
goosebumps. We should have been
Yes.
friends as little girls, because these are all my books.
Yes, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, The Witches. So I've always known that I wanted to write and create worlds,
Right, right.
but again, just so intimidated by the format.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny because I think that as I've grown older, I don't think I ever realized how meticulous I was as a child.
Mm-hmm.
So I would look at things and I would always look and examine the structure of things and ask myself if I was able to do it. And I don't know
Wow.
if that was maybe because of my classical piano background,
Mm-hmm.
but I always looked at things from a structural standpoint. So I never looked at fiction and said, of course I can just write a story. I'm just going to go ahead and write a story like many of my students do.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Mm-hmm.
think nothing about structure.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
when they're reading, I'm always telling them, like, look, you all are avid readers,
Yeah.
and you have to look at the way it is structured on the page. It's more than just writing the story. You have to write a story that can the reader can follow. And that's the
Mhm.
reason why we have paragraphs. That's the reason why we indent. That's the reason why we have open and close quotation marks. That's the reason why we have speech tags. And teaching them this has been so difficult because the concept is just not there. They just write. I mean, a child with a whole long run on sentence. And I'm horrified because as a child, not that I was perfect, but I saw the structure and I said,
Mhm.
oh no, that's too much. That's too much. That's too intimidating. And I was really, really reluctant to learn and to dive into fiction. And I didn't dive into fiction truly until I was an adult. Not until I was an
Wow.
adult. Yes. And it's so funny. I have a creative writing minor from Rutgers in undergrad.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I got away with only taking like one fiction writing class. I just kept
Wow.
grabbing poetry and then I would do playwriting, and
Mhm.
but I ran. And I'll never forget one of my professors sent me an email like, I don't want you to be scared of this fiction writing course.
Mhm.
He was like, you can do it. Just stick with me. Girl, I was mortified and I dropped it.
Wow.
I was
So
mortified.
So what was that moment? When did this it has to be called a healing, so to speak, that you kind of engaged in that allowed you to create something like this book, Dr. Jen, you if
Right.
folks can see it, this is I'm so proud of this copy that I have that I know, folks, and this came out, I would say before Lovecraft came out,
It did.
right? Right before, not
No.
the book,
So
not the book, but the show, or around the same time the show came out.
so no. So that book was just released last May.
Okay,
So it
I
was
feel
just
like I've
released
had a
last
longer.
May. So that's a little bit after Lovecraft. But yeah, it was written way before
Right, right, right,
Lovecraft. Oh
right,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes.
right, right,
I was
right,
in the process of writing it since 2015 is
right.
when I started writing it, 2015, 2016.
All
So
right. So tell us what happened. When did this change? This from this structured mind that was intimidated by
mhm.
the thought of a novel. What gave you the courage or the confidence to move forward and start writing novels?
I knew my students needed them. I
Mm.
was in the classroom in Prince George's County, and I remember feeling so lost. This is early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and being so annoyed by how few Black writers were approved for us to teach.
Interesting.
And the books weren't there. And I think people really need to understand that the whole YA and middle grade, that's really relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
Why, girl, when we were kids, there was no such thing as no
Right,
YA in
right,
middle
right, right.
grade.
Right. A
It was a
book's a
kid's
book.
book. Yes, it was a kid's book and an adult's book. There weren't
Right,
these subcategories.
right,
And so even in the early 2000s, there's not a lot of books for Black children
right.
and teens. So the first book that I started to write was called Graffiti Sunshine, and it was about a little boy who wanted to be a rapper. And he had this grandmother that passed away, but his grandmother, in like a last letter to him before she passes, leaves like a clues to a treasure hunt. And so he goes on this treasure hunt in New Orleans. And I had at that time become like really obsessed with New Orleans. I'd been there several times and to visit. And so I was like, this would be amazing. And of course, and it's 2005, so I'm not thinking about appropriation or any of those things now. Like now, I wouldn't dare write no book about no New Orleans. I am not from New Orleans, and I know how people roll now. But then that wasn't the case.
Right, right,
And
right.
so I just knew that my students needed that because like 80% of my students were not readers. And I would
Mm,
interview them and I would ask, like, hey, why don't you like to read? And they're like, I would read if anything was interesting.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like one of the first people in my school to have a classroom library. And I would just go out and I would buy books. And I've always, as you can see, I've
Yeah.
always collected a lot of books. And this is just one of our bookshelves. This is just
Right.
my speculative fiction bookshelf and my craft bookshelf. Downstairs, we have a whole library of books, my husband and I. But I just started to, and again, this is 2004, 2005. So I go to the store and I get an old little library card system that you can buy, and I attach them to the back of my books, So I had things like Betsy Brown by Intozaki
Oh, it's like a
Shange.
Shanghai, right?
Yes, and I had For Color Girls, and it's just, they just need on the come up. They need
Right, right.
what's her other book that was made into a movie? Oh gosh, The Hate You Give. They
Mm-hmm.
need those types of books. They need the
Mm-hmm.
Poedex. They need, Jason Reynolds' Long Way Down, and they need, books like Kwame uh
Aquaman,
gosh, what's his name? That's terrible. He writes novels in verse most of the time.
that did the crossover.
Yes, the crossover and rebound, and
Right,
they need
right,
those books by those
right.
authors, and I didn't see them. Again, these are
Mm-hmm.
books that have just come out within the last 10 years.
Right,
You know,
including, and so I'm going to bring it back to yours. Can and I actually want to read the description on the back, because it says it gives very much. I'm sure you get the comparison to Harry Potter.
yeah.
I'm sure you get the comparison to Lovecraft, the
Hmm.
show, not necessarily what
The book.
the book is. But when famed magician Dr. Marvellus Djinn selects a motley crew of talented teens to tour her theme park of magic and mythological creatures, all are elated for the opportunity. First, there's Brenda, the kleptomaniac inventor of thingamajigs no one knew they needed. Then there's Omen, a strong man itching to prove himself in a brand new arena. Wise beyond her years, Claire is a business savvy sage who's been making ends meet since the age of 12. And finally, there's Elliot, the chemistry whiz who believes he's one ingredient away from concocting a cure for bigotry. So in this book, what you
Hmm.
have is you've brought magic, you've brought a motley assortment of Black teens
Hmm.
coming together, powerful, but there, what is the protagonist? It's, if you want to say, it's bigotry, it's racism. So you making this very relevant, this very real contemporary issue, centuries long issue, into
Right.
something now that's accessible to young people. So you're saying that you were inspired by your students, but what you have here is something that is definitely has the potential to become a classic, and is something that is beyond just a YA, with our stupid categories. It's something more than a YA. It's an odyssey. So how did it go from I don't want to I'm doing this for my students to now I have this story? And you said you began writing in 2015. Was there something in particular that made you pop off with this? Because this is a meaty book.
Yeah, my love of history. I love history, and I feel like there's so much obscure Black history
Mm,
that I wanted to shine light on. And I
mm.
just kept falling down these rabbit holes. So when I was very, very young, I wanted to be a magician. And
There it
my mom,
goes.
yes, my mom even bought me like a little magic kit. And I wasn't very good, but to be quite honest, like I've always loved magic and
Mhm,
mystery, and I'm an only child, so I've always lived in my head.
mhm.
So one random day, I literally started thinking about, hey, where are all the Black magicians? There have to be some Black magicians. But I had never heard of any. So I said, you know what, let me do some quick research. Oh my goodness. I find all of these early 20th century magicians that were
Wow.
Black, yes, and some of whom were thriving, and they were each different. Like I didn't know, I had no idea that Henry Box Brown after he mailed himself to Philadelphia and escaped slavery, he literally went to Europe and became this thriving, amazing magician.
No way.
Yes, and one of his major staples was escape tricks. That's what he would
Wow.
do. Yes, on stage.
Wow. And
And
this is before Houdini and all of those things that we know.
listen, Richard Potter, the first American magician, was a black man.
Wow. No
Yes,
way.
yes. And girl, this is the 1700s, the 1700s, and he was in New Hampshire.
Wow.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and so now that you mention it, that's something that's really a traditional magician mainstay, getting out of that box, the sawing of the box. So this
Hmm.
was literally created by the black man who mailed himself to freedom. Wow.
Listen, I
Had no
I
idea.
and I come across this another magician. His name was Black Herman, and Black
Mhm.
Herman was the most successful of all black magicians. Girl, you
Wow.
would love Black Herman. He was something else, but you would love him. So he started off. He was an apprentice to Prince Herman. Then Prince Herman passes away, and so he kind of, in order to honor, Prince Herman, he names himself Black Herman. And he develops this tonic. So apparently Black Herman was like strong. He's like maybe, 6'3" or 6'4". He's well built. So he has this health tonic that he starts to sell. So he has that. Then he has these magic tricks. Then girl, he started his own little beauty companies. Like his wife had a
What?
beauty company arm, and then he had his own courses where he was doing mail order courses teaching people how to do magic. And this
What?
man had so much money that he was able to, and he was so famous, he was able to sell out Marcus Garvey's theater in Harlem. Yes, for
Wow.
an entire, I think 75 days straight. He
Wow.
had a sold out audience.
I've never heard of him. And you say
Yes,
he named himself after Prince Herman. Where
yes.
was that? Where Prince Herman was he a real monarch or was this something?
This was
Okay,
another
gotcha,
magician that he happened
gotcha.
to meet. So Black Herman
Wow.
he was born in Virginia.
Okay,
And he spent most of his time on the East Coast, but he did, I believe, for some time live in Chicago. I'm reading a little bit more about him now, but
okay.
because it's hard to find information, I'm really digging because these are like really obscure people that
Wow.
so I'm digging to find things. But yeah, and he also had his whole thing was he was a follower of Garvey. So he injected black nationalism into his magic acts.
Wow.
Yes, and so that's how I got the idea. He's Dr. Marvelous Djinn is loosely based on Black Herman and a combination of a few other magicians.
Wow. Just listening to you. So I'm mesmerized and I have to actually make notes to myself to not veer off topic because I can talk to you because I know the level of research that you do for your writing because you are ultimately besides being insanely artistic and just an empath, you're also like a scholar and you're that's what you do. And so I think this is the most natural segue to talk about what you had your forthcoming. It's really on sale now as a digital text, but it's
Yes,
forthcoming
a
as
hardcover.
a hardcover, right? I can't wait for
Yes,
that to come by. I got it on my calendar for when it comes out. But can you
yes.
talk a little bit about your curriculum?
Sure. So this is also going to veer into how I got my agent.
Mm,
So So Dr. Marvelous Jen's Oz Scholars, it happens. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that in my digging, I also found this black-owned amusement park in DC called Suburban Gardens. And
yes,
I could not believe that there were such things as segregated colored amusement parks. I
yeah,
could not believe it. And there
yeah,
were a few throughout the country.
yeah.
One being Suburban Gardens in DC, and one being Lincoln Electric Park in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, wow.
So I just thought about the story, and I said, "Oh, what if she had a theme park?" Because I love amusement parks. I've always loved them since I was a child, and so that's how I got this idea for Dr. Marvelous Genocide Scholars. And then
Yeah.
I said, "Oh, what about a safari in the park? Oh, since this is about magic, what if they're African mythological creatures that we really don't hear about it as well?" And I had already been doing the the research for these African mythological creatures, which actually turned into another book
Right,
that I
right.
just sold to Algonquin back in October. So anyway,
Congratulations. That's so amazing.
thank
I didn't
you.
know. I wanted to mention that. I wasn't sure if that, but I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I'm looking forward to that because I'm such a fan of mythology. So I'm so
Yes,
excited. Yeah.
that's amazing, and it's going to
Yeah.
feature 63 creatures. So we're
Wow.
working on that now. I'm in meetings, usually like once every couple weeks we gather to talk about that. But so
Yeah.
back to Dr. Marvelous Gen's Odd Scholars. So Dr. Gen's Odd Scholars is done. So the next step is to try and get an agent, right? Because I don't
Hmm.
want to self-publish.
Right.
I don't have the time, and I want a book that I can truly that can be marketed by someone else. I want it in advance. Those are the things that I want. So I'm submitting to different agents. Submitting Dr. Jen. Girl, no, 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 no,
Wow.
no, 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 nope, nope. So I'm like, okay, but this is how it goes. You
Hmm.
know, I don't know if people know this, but only 1 in 6,000 authors who query get an agent. That those are the numbers, 1 in 6,000. It's ridiculous, ridiculous. So I said, you know what? Let me rewind, go back to some other ideas that I have. And I'm still teaching. I'm still passionate about finding things that are engaging for our students and also trying to develop interdisciplinary things for our
Hmm.
students. Because one of the reasons that I think education is so stagnant and sterile, if you will, is
Hmm.
because I don't think the students really get the connections between the subjects. They go
Hmm.
to math class, the bell rings, they're in biology. There's no
Right.
connection between algebra and biology. What are you talking
Right.
about? That's not
Right.
related. Then I go to, language arts or my English 101 class, English 9, excuse me. There's no connection between English and math. What are you talking about? Now I'm going to, phys ed. There's no connection between that. And the reason why I think education is so, I don't know, so stale to so many of our students is because educators aren't doing a good job of showing
Hmm.
those connections and focusing on the whole child. So I said, you
Hmm.
know what? I want to. So by now, I'm working for FIYAH Literary Magazine, Black
Hmm.
speculative fiction, and
Hmm.
I've built connections over the years with amazing authors like Tanana Reeve Dew and,
Hmm.
Troy Wiggins, who was the publisher of Fire, and Zeta Elliott, who's my homegirl. She just released the third chapter of her series, Dragons
Hmm.
in a Bag series. So she just
Hmm.
released The Witch's Apprentice. I love her.
Hmm.
So I'm like, why don't I develop a textbook? I'm studying for a master's in curriculum, so I know how to do the curriculum. I just need original stories because, of course, you have to worry about copyrights,
Hmm.
and all a textbook really is an anthology
Hmm.
with comprehension questions,
Yes.
vocabulary,
Yep.
extension activities. That's what
Break
it
it
is.
down. That's
That's
right.
what it is. It's an
That's what it is.
anthology.
That's
And
what
it
it
also
is.
includes mini lessons and a glossary.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
so I said, why don't I go ahead and do this? I think I can do this. And then, FIYAH helped me because I realized rates, and I really am
Hmm.
passionate about writers being paid no matter
Yes.
what. Everybody needs to be paid.
Yes.
So I was like, well, I don't have the money, but maybe I can raise it through Indiegogo.
Hmm.
Girl, this project, thanks to Audrey T. Williams, the sister who I met in another group. She's also a speculative writer. She's amazing. She's on the West Coast. So we
Hmm.
just started to talk, and I talked about the textbook, and she was like, "This is amazing. I want to be a part of it. I have some folks that can really, push this on Twitter and, on Facebook, where what have you, because I have a huge network, don't get me
Mm.
wrong,
Yes, you
but
do.
my network and her network and then
Mm-hmm.
other, it was huge. So
Mm-hmm.
before I knew it, we were funded within a few weeks.
Yes, you were. Yeah.
Like, we were fun. It didn't take long. So I said, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" And then I got so many people to sign on. Like, we have Nebula World winners, girl.
Yeah.
P. Jelly Clark and Cherie Renee
Yes.
Thomas, and like, I was
Yes.
able to really get some amazing names to write for
Mm-hmm.
the book, as well as your daughter Kyrie. So I definitely wanted to include young people in the
Mm-hmm.
textbook,
Right,
because
right,
I'd
right.
never seen anything like that. And I thought,
Right.
wouldn't it be fun and empowering for a young person to see their work in a
Mm-hmm.
textbook? You know what I mean? And
Yes. Yeah.
and it broken down, and activities around
Mm-hmm.
surrounding it. Like, how I think about myself as a child, and oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
that would be everything to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I covered all of the bases, and then I said, okay, so if folks donate more than this, and this, they need a perk. That's how it goes with these crowdfunding campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this short story just sitting, around, and I said, well, you know what, this is a really good short story. I hadn't tried to sell it or anything, but I thought it was good. So I said, you know what? Let's give him a short story as a perk. These are all ways that my donors know that I'm serious. They know I work for
Mm-hmm.
FIYAH. They know I'm a
Mm-hmm.
teacher. They know I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So there we go. So one thing that I did in my crowdfunding campaign, every single person that donated, I wrote a personal email thanking them.
Yes, you
Every
did.
single person. No matter, even if they donated $2, I
Yes.
I did that. So
You,
by
what I have to say, one of the most communicative campaigns that I've ever supported. Like, you were on it, and you made it very conversational, as if it was personal, a personal conversation between you and the donors. It was magnificent.
And I wanted to do that because you have to, girl, people giving you their hard-earned money.
Right.
They don't have to buy anything from you. So
Right.
anytime anybody supports me, I'm like, "Oh my God, let me
Mm-hmm.
thank the world. Let me let you know I think the world of you because
Right.
you believe in me."
Right.
So by honestly, by, the 100th donor, I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, my hand's starting to fall off, but I got to make sure I write this." So
Mm-hmm.
suddenly I get an email, and it's like, "Hi, I'm an agent. I read your story, and I think you're magnificent. What do you want to do with your career? Let's talk." Oh my God, I almost fell out my seat. This is a random donor that I'd never talked to, who just happened to spend some money in the campaign, donate, contribute to my campaign, read my short story perk, and thought enough of me to be like, "Hey, let's talk." So we talked, and I find out, I'm looking at her and I'm like, I know her. Have I queried her? So I look back, because remember, I told you I queried
Mm-hmm.
several people,
Mm-hmm.
and I just decided to take a break because I was tired
Right.
of all the rejections, and so I
Right.
focused on the textbook.
Right.
So I
Right. Right.
go back, child. This woman is the boss of one of the editors who
Wow.
rejected me. She, literally, this woman, Laurie McLean, all right, is the she is the co-owner of Fuse Literary.
Wow.
So we start dialoguing. She's like, "Okay, what you got? What you got? What you got?" Listen, as a child, one of the best bits of advice my grandmother always gave me was, "Be ye ready."
Mm-hmm.
Be ye ready was one of her favorite verses in the Bible. Be ye ready. And so I'm always prepared, and I'm always writing. It's like, even if I wasn't making any money, I would still be writing. Like,
Right.
I'm just
Right.
always doing it. So I
Right.
had like over 100 pages of work to send to her.
Mm-hmm.
I send it to her. She's like, "Oh my God, I want to represent you." The end.
Yes.
And so that's how it segued,
Right.
and opened up doors for me that I'd never seen,
Wow.
or expected.
So were you intending on the curriculum to be self-published?
And it
You
is. And it
okay.
still is. So the
Okay.
textbook is still mine and still self-published.
Okay.
And, nobody has that. It's still, owned by me.
Right.
But um Fangs, Feathers, and Folklore, my compendium of
Mm-hmm.
mythological creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Laurie McLean sold that to Algonquin. Then I
Mm-hmm.
have two forthcoming picture books that were just sold to one of the big five companies. Yes,
Yes.
and I can't announce it yet. That'll be announced probably within the next like 2 to 3 weeks. They're just coming
That's
off of winter break. But I just got a
wonderful.
two-book deal from them as
That's
well
wonderful.
for picture
Yes.
books. So yeah, so that's how I made it here.
Oh my goodness. Are are those books or anything coming on in the pipeline regarding these magicians? The history of these magicians?
I honestly am working on a picture book now.
Okay.
Yes,
Yes.
for the magicians. I'm just
You
trying to
could-
figure out an angle because with picture books, it's always about like an
Right.
angle,
Right, 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 right,
and
right.
so I'm working on that too. So that's my other project that I have my mind on. It's like kind of in the background, but you
Right.
know, um,
This is
and I wrote like the first
amazing.
couple lines of that picture book not long ago, and I think I'm going to focus on Richard Potter, but I'm not sure because
Mm-hmm.
like I have another idea where I want to highlight maybe four of those magicians, because again they're all really obscure.
Right, right. I mean, I that's a whole nother episode. I cannot wait till you come up with that. I'm a grown woman and I will buy that picture book.
Yes,
But
yes,
as we come to the end, I mean, you've given us so much. I feel that you're just sharing your journey in itself is just you know, something that an aspiring writer definitely can gain some wisdom from. The fact that you've always been prepared because you've always written, but you've
yes,
written as from a history of being a voracious reader. I think the
yes,
takeaway should always be, if you really want to write, you really got to read.
yes,
But then staying in the game and finding ways to leverage your connections with other people. I'm hearing also the value in these connections that you've met along the way, and not just hanging with people because you want to be their network, but hanging with people and forming these authentic relationships where folks get a chance to see you as your whole self, knowing you and your talents, and then being given the choice to support you on this journey. Because it sounds like, in addition to you being prepared, you also opened yourself up to have connections with other people. Um, and as we close out, I want you to give the details regarding how folks can learn more to get this curriculum and to support your work. Where can
oh,
folks find you?
absolutely. You can find Dr. Marvelous Jen's Odd Scholars on Amazon. You can also purchase it through MV Media. This is published through a small independent press owned by Milton Davis. Milton is out of Fayetteville, Georgia, and he's fantastic and supportive. I've known Milton now for over like 12 or 13 years. And
Wonderful.
he's a fantastic author and publisher of Black speculative fiction. So that's where you can get Dr. Marvelous Jen's Odd Scholars. You can follow me on Twitter at Sharise_B. On Instagram is at b.Sharise and on Facebook b.Sharise Moore.
You do want people following you on LinkedIn, or that's
No, that's fine too. I always forget LinkedIn. You can look up Bridget Moore, I believe, on LinkedIn. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, it has been such a pleasure. I'm one of your biggest fans, and I actually would love to probably interview you again to really learn from you what that transition was from you being a writer before having your child, and the reason why I ask is because when I think of Toni Morrison and I think of Maya Angelou and these renowned writers who speak specifically about that writer's journey and how they carved out this writer's life in the midst of being a mother, which was one
Yes.
one of the most important jobs that they felt that they had. So that's for
Yes.
next time. That's for next time. But
Definitely.
be Sharise Moore, thank you so much for being part of the Black Writers Studio, and until we talk again, I'm so proud of you. Congratulations
Thank
on
you
your
so
work.
much. Thank you,
Yay.
Khadijah. I love you. Thank you for having me. And I think the world of you and all you've done for
Oh,
community and
oh,
for homeschoolers, for parents. And thank you for sharing your journey with your daughter. It's beautiful. And you are the model.
oh.
You really are.
Oh, I
You really
appreciate
are.
you. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
you. Enjoy the rest of your day, darling. Bye bye.
Bye bye.